Ben did a little bit of a mini deep dive.
Okay. I was going to go to this.
Okay.
I don't know if maybe we should go to Germany first, because Germany is
true.
dealing with their own debt problems.
Yes.
Right? And there's a kind of similar problem going on in their government.
Yes, it's very
this.
similar.
Yeah. So we can go there first.
Yes. Okay. Good call.
Yeah.
So the current German coalition is made up of 3 parties. The German Greens, the environmentalist, liberal, kind of center-left party. Then you have the FDP, the Freedom for Deutschland party. They are like the neoliberal, classical liberal, just free market laissez-faire types. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Social Democratic Party, the SPD. And they are like the historic Democratic Socialist Party, Social Democratic Party, not as socialist as they used to be, but socially democratic in the way that you would think about like AOC or something. Mm-hmm. So this is the coalition. They call it the traffic light coalition because it's yellow, green, red. It's a very interesting government coalition because all 3 of them have very different priorities, right? The Greens is to change our environmental and fuel systems so that the environment is safe. The socialists, social democrats, whatever, I'm American, okay? You're red. It's all the same to me. The social democrats, they are really in favor of labor and stuff like that. And then you have the SDP.
SPD.
No. I'm sorry. FDP, the Freedom for Deutschland Party, the liberals, they want to limit all spending. End of story.
Yes.
They're like the the strict dad who gives you an allowance to the social democrats who want to spend everything.
Oh my God, I'm thinking about my friends who like fit under that umbrella, and it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's this dynamic. So the FDP was very smart. When they formed their government, they were able to get their way and become the finance minister of the governing coalition. So the finance minister, who is a member of the FDP, is presenting a budget that will cut spending for the first time since 2019. The spending level will still be above what they had in 2019, but it's coming back down closer to that number. So Lindner, he's the finance minister.
Christian Lindner.
Thank you. His draft budget comprises 445 billion euros. Next year, around 30 billion less euros than in 2023, but still 90 billion more euros than in 2019. So all departments will have to make some savings compared to this year. Okay. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that are not getting touched in this, which I think is actually really, really interesting, is he's not touching the Department of Labor. He's not touching the Department of Welfare.
Okay.
And he's slightly raising the Department of Defense budget.
Okay.
Those are the things that are getting raised. The main thing he's cutting is child tax credits. That's the main thing that's getting cut. But I don't want to sound like a conservative here. It's not the worst way it could get cut. So this is how child tax credits are getting cut in Germany.
Okay.
Only households that have an income of $150,000 150,000 euros or more would be affected by the cuts and will no longer have access to the child raising allowance. I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, compared to a Department of Labor and the Department of Defense when there's a war in Ukraine, I do think child tax credits are more of a nice to have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Especially for people who make over 150,000 euros.
Yes.
Right. So that's why it's kind of okay. But the left isn't happy about this. The left party, which is outside of the Social Democratic Party, the left party, who's not currently in the government, is mad that there are budget cuts at all, considering that the defense budget is getting raised by 1.7 billion euros next year. The left is obviously going to be very against any increases in defense spending.
Yeah, and the history of Germany has been to spend very, very little on defense in the past century or so, for obvious reasons, because they didn't want to give themselves that kind of power. Well, and while they were under control half by the Soviet Union, half by the West, neither the Soviet Union nor the West wanted to give them any kind of military power.
Right.
And even since gaining independence and reuniting as a country, they didn't really want to build that up. So they're kind of in a very transitionary place where they've been dependent on Russia for their gas supply, for their energy for so long, and now Russia invades Ukraine, completely shaking up the geopolitical dynamic in Europe. And all of a sudden Germany is like, okay, well, Russia only needs to invade Poland, like to come right up to our doorstep.
Yep.
We need to build up our own defenses. Plus, we want to be able to support Ukraine in their own defense.
Well, they want to be. Listen, Europe's future is to become militarily independent from the United States. I do not think that Europe views the United States as a consistent ally.
Really?
I don't think they're convinced that we're done with our populist non-interventionist moment that was Donald Trump.
Okay.
I don't think they're convinced. I think they're scared of another non-interventionist coming in, and God forbid there's another Ukraine situation, and America's not there to bail us out.
Yeah.
Now, Europe is actually spending more money in the defense of Ukraine, but a year ago, it was like all America. And the American support is what kept Ukraine from collapsing in the first place. And I think now Germany and the rest of the countries in the Eastern Bloc of Europe especially are going to be building up their defenses. Poland is buying HIMARS systems from the United States to the tunes of multi-billion dollars.
Yeah, and tensions at the Poland-Belarus border have already been rising. We haven't really talked about this yet, but Belarus has been doing some military operations right near the border of Poland, and I think there was a flight that crossed the border in the airspace, and things got very shaky for a second. So Poland's been reinforcing that border with troops already. We haven't done a Ukraine deep dive.
We haven't in a
yet,
while.
have we?
No.
We should probably get that on the docket.
Yeah, let's get on the docket.
But sources that I've heard from kind of expect that Russia needs to push past Ukraine in this current conquest for territory for them to feel nationally secure. And Poland is very much on the list of countries that could be in the way. So for Poland and for these other Eastern European countries, as you're saying, it makes all the sense in the world. Like, if they're seeing the writing on the wall, they need to stock up.
And now them choosing to raise more money in defense, that is going to come at cuts to other things. And now that leads us into the next part of Germany's budget fall, where they're cutting, other than the child tax credit. So now Germany is making substantial cuts to their infrastructure. They are having massive issues with rail funding. The Germany railway operators suggest that they need 45 billion euros of fresh money by 2024 for upgrades to prepare for the increase of passenger numbers that are going to come with a growing population, that's going to come with a greener environment. And the finance minister is only allocating 12 billion euros up until 2027. And labor unions are pissed at this. Labor unions are insisting that the finance minister is not investing on the future. He is pushing a brake on the future. There are multiple challenges as the green transition and social issues, and leaders of the German labor unions are suggesting that this is failing to invest in things that will make lives better for Germans. Yeah. So it's a very similar story between this and the United States.
Yeah, well, I feel like what we didn't quite outline here is the key for Lindner, like the Republicans in the U.S., is to reduce the debt.
Yeah.
Right. That's why he wants to reduce spending. So what he's proposing is to implement a debt brake, BRAKE, which means you can only borrow a certain fraction of GDP. And so that's where these unions are saying that debt brake, that's a brake on our future. Right. And it, of course, works with the infrastructure perfectly as a pun. And I think I'm kind of in agreement. The question really is, like, it's hard to figure out where to draw the line.
Yeah.
Right? There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be progress to be made. How hard do you push towards that progress, and how much debt do you take on to try to do it?
Well, Lindner says something that we talk about all the time. He says the interest costs on our budget are now twice as high as the budget for education and research. We simply cannot afford new rampant debts. They would be financially unfeasible. I don't disagree with you. I understand. I just wish that there was a more incentive to have a better tax system that would capture more percentage of the GDP, that this wouldn't be so much of an issue.
Yeah, it's interesting. I looked into the German tax system a little bit.
Yeah.
It's pretty similar to the US. They have a bit higher of a marginal tax rate at the top. They're like 42%. We're at 37%. But the tax revenue that they brought in 2022 is almost the exact same percentage of GDP
There you go.
as the US
There you
at
go.
like 19%.
That makes me so mad as an American because they have like basically free healthcare and we don't. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, check out our healthcare deep dive if you want to figure out why we spend way more on healthcare than any other country.
Yes. But this is what's going on in Germany right now. And, all of Europe is kind of in this economic crisis. We talk about the United Kingdom a couple times on the show. The United Kingdom is in a very, very difficult place.
Yeah.
France is in an okay spot, but, they're going to have some hard decisions now that they have to beef up their defense spending.
Definitely. It does make me think, bigger picture question here.
Yeah.
What are the necessities that government has to pay for, right? Like I just made the point of there are always more problems, right? You could always try to fix more, so which means you could always tax more. When is it going too far, right? Because for us, we think, helping poverty, yeah, it seems like a pretty fair reason to tax.
Mm-hmm.
Defending Ukraine, that seems like a pretty fair reason to tax. It's hard for me to figure out exactly where I would draw that line because most of the issues we do talk about seem like, yeah, obviously you should tax to try to fix those.
Listen, when it has to do with education, labor, healthcare, poverty, housing,
life or death,
or death stuff, that's when I'm like going to be okay with raising taxes to fund stuff through the government, right? But it's just a larger thing of Germany's also going through an economic recession, right? So they're not growing as fast. They don't have as much money to spend. And we talk about the best way to get government to do things and get the government money to do stuff is to grow your economy. That's the best way.
That is the best
That's
way.
better than taxing.
Yeah.
Right? So now Germany is going through a recession. I don't want Germany to repeat their mistakes of going through austerity in the face of a recession. That's what they did in 2008. And in 2008, the Europe response to 2008 was a disaster for the continent. Their decision to pursue a policy of austerity stifled their economic opportunity. The United States with a different route. We passed the stimulus package. We did a fiscal stimulus response. The United States did the biggest COVID response out of any other Western nation. And because of that, we have expected GDP growth of 6% coming in the next year. The opposite happens in Europe, where they choose a policy of austerity. And now you see an issue where they don't have the money to fund the things they want, and they're going through a recession. So,
Fair point.
Yeah, it's interesting how Germany and the United States are going through something so similar.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is the case in a lot of countries right now, right? Like the late stage capitalism is causing problems.
Yep.
Governments want to spend to fix them, but the problems are kind of moving faster than they can handle right now.